the Gardening Queen and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to talk about my advice that I have for new plant parents, since the houseplant community has certainly grown quite a bit over the last year since the pandemic hit. So I'm sure there's a lot of new plant parents that might benefit from the advice that I have to give. I've personally been in the houseplant community for quite a long time. I've taken care of houseplants for basically my entire life. I grew up in a house filled with houseplants and on a decent sized property with multiple outside gardens too. So I'm also well versed in the outside gardening as well. And maybe I'll make videos on that. We just moved into the house that we live in now back in August. So we have some gardening that we're gonna do this year as well. So my first advice is to start small. You don't need to have a collection of over 100 plants in your first month, year even. You can start with some small 4-inch plants that you can find at the grocery store, your local nursery, or big box stores. I do like to suggest big box stores for beginners because some of them, such as Home Depot where I am, have really good return policies, and that can be really handy when you're first getting into the hobby because plants can be expensive, and unfortunately killing plants is also part of the hobby. So being able to return or even exchange the plant that might have perished for a new one gives you more of a learning experience and doesn't cost you a lot as well. So check out your nurseries, your Home Depot, your Lowe's, your Rona, your Canadian Tire if you're in Canada, and see what they have in their selections. And pick up like Aglaonema, pothos, snake plants, dracaenas. Starting off with the easier to find inexpensive houseplants is hopefully going to be able to train you into being able to take care of the rarer plants, and it will also help you save money in the long run, because if you end up killing some of these plants, it's really not that big of a deal because you can go down to your Home Depot, your Lowe's or whatever and pick it up again for another $5-10. And like I said, if they have a really good return policy, then that's an extra win for you. So yeah, save your money and wait, and then you'll be able to do this. Plant parenthood takes time. And I mean, some people have just jumped into getting rare plants, and good for them if it's worked out. But me personally has been quite the journey, and I've only started collecting rare tropicals probably since 2018. So, and even then, I mean, that's still a while considering the hype has really started to become real in the last year. But anyways, remember that it doesn't matter that you start with a pothos. Like, a pothos is still an excellent plant. I don't just have these rare philodendrons, alocasias, anthuriums, monsteras. Like, that's not all that I have in my house. I have a large collection of common plants too, and I've had some of them for a really long time. Like, and they thrive, and I love them, and they fill a space that something like these guys can't necessarily fill. So yeah, start small. So the next advice that I like to give to new plant parents is do your own research. So this doesn't mean messaging all of the creators that you follow, asking them, what is this plant? How do I care for it? And questions like that, or questions like, why is my plant dying? Because I mean, I've received those messages and I don't necessarily know what your house is like. So I'm not going to be able to give you the best advice. And being a new plant parent, you might not be able to give me the information I need to be able to tell you what's wrong with your plant. So instead of asking all of the creators that you follow, a really good advice that I can give you is Google. Google is excellent, and not just Google for like what type of plant this is, but Google what type of care. And then as soon as you find out the general care, think about what's going on in your house and where the plant can sit in your house, and then go back and watch YouTube videos from creators specifically identifying where their plant sits and what keeps it happy, or maybe what doesn't keep it happy, because I think it's equally as important to share our failures with each other. Because if I kill a plant, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you why I think it died. It might be because I stuck it in a bathroom with no window and I forgot about it. I mean, I'm not perfect. I've killed so many plants, and I'll get to that later on in the video. So lots of the time when you buy a plant from like a big box store or even a local nursery, they'll have a tag in the pot. So I don't necessarily listen to those tags, because sometimes you get a plant that says tropical plant. Like, that's not a name of a plant. And if you're buying from a local nursery, hopefully they'll be able to tell you what plant it is, and that will give you more information for you to go home and look up all the information you can find on that plant. But if not, definitely do your research. You can reverse image search on Google, which is super helpful when it comes to plants. And then look at the type of care that you can find with that. The next thing that I think is super important, and probably the most important advice that I can give to any new plant parent, or just any plant parent in general, is to find out the natural environment that the plant that you're interested in actually grows in. Because if you can mimic those conditions even in the slightest, you're probably going to be more successful when it comes to growing your plant in your home. I mean, we're never going to have the Amazon basin in our house, and if you do, I mean, congratulations. I wish. But we can do what we can. Like, I have my 2 Detolf greenhouse cabinets and the Millsbo as well. I even have a 6-foot greenhouse in my plant room, which, I mean, that doesn't always work for everyone. So, I mean, even when it comes to light and window space, you have to look and see what plant is going to benefit from your home, and doing the research and finding out where this plant grows in nature is really going to benefit you there. A funny story that I'll have to tell you, because I worked in a plant nursery. People would buy succulents and put them in dark corners, and every time they would come in, I'd be like, oh, where do you plan on putting this? And I'd ask them where the closest window was, what way the window was facing, and generally it was in a space that had low light, and that was the conception that most people had, that succulents can live in low light conditions. And that's when I asked them, where do you think succulents grow in nature? And they think, and they go, the desert. And I'm like, so what does the desert have that you're not going to be giving it? And the one thing, I see the light bulb come off in their head, and they go, the sun. Yes, the sun. Succulents require an obscene amount of light to stay happy. Otherwise they get all stretched out and elotated and funky looking, and they die, and they become overwatered significantly fast. And I personally don't own any succulents because they aren't for me, even though I do have the conditions for it. I'd rather give other plants that I like those conditions instead. But anyway, so we really need to think about where our plants come from and what we can give them to, at best, try and mimic the natural environment. So my next advice is to understand the conditions in your house as best as you can. So a big tip for me, and I did this when we were house shopping, is I have my phone and there's a compass on my phone, and I would stand at the window and see where the compass was facing. So where I'm sitting right now is a large south-facing window, which is one of the reasons why we bought the house, because it has amazing light, and my plants have been growing all winter long despite the lower light levels, which has been excellent. But anyways, so look and see which way your window faces, and then you can figure out which light works for the plants that you want. So for instance, north is going to be lower light conditions, or bright indirect if it's right in the windowsill. East is going to be more of a soft morning light, so soft direct sun for a minimal amount of time, going to bright indirect light to lower light conditions later on. South is the absolute best window you can have for all day sun, because when it rises from the east, it goes over and it has the longest period of time in the south facing area. And then we get to west, which is your evening sun, and that can be really, really hot depending on how your west window is situated, or it can be a little bit more of a dispersed indirect type of west light. But either way, look and find out with a compass which way your windows face, and then you can decide which plants are going to be best situated for the space that you have. So my next tip is a bit controversial, because I know a few people in the houseplant community have talked against this, but I highly suggest getting a moisture meter. I personally still use a moisture meter for most of my plants that are still in soil, especially the ones that are in big pots, because I can't fully tell how much moisture is still in the pot or how much moisture the soil is retaining depending on the mix it is, because I have multiple different soil mixes that I use for different plants. So moisture meters have helped my fiddle leaf fig. I am just getting back into ficuses in general because I finally have the light for them. And it's definitely a strategy to start getting used to how much water a plant needs in the space that it is in. So it's not as simple as I give it a cup of water a week. It's definitely a lot more in depth. But anyways, another thing about the moisture meter, which I think is really excellent, is they're very easy for beginners to use. So for example, I left for 7 weeks and my fiance was stuck taking care of all of my plants. And I didn't have nearly as many as I did right now, like maybe about 100 to 150-ish when I was gone. And he didn't kill anyone except for one Calathea medallion, which I had recently purchased from the store before leaving, and it ended up having spider mites. So that's not on him, but he managed to keep so many plants alive, and including a fiddle leaf fig, which for a beginner who doesn't really know anything about plants, I'm giving him kudos for that. I'm definitely proud of him. And then I left for another 2.5 weeks later on, which I then had more of this type of collection, which he ended up doing just fine as well. He didn't kill any of them. So my last advice I've already kind of touched on at the beginning of the video, and that is don't be afraid to kill plants. It's part of the journey, and honestly, you shouldn't be embarrassed. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad plant parent. It just happens. And sometimes it's not anything that you can help. Like the plant can come from the store with bugs, and because you're a new plant parent, you might not be able to ID what bugs look like. For example, back in the day when I started and I got a palm, which I don't suggest palms for beginners at all. That palm ended up having spider mites, and I didn't look at the plant until it was completely webbed with spider mites, and I panicked, and that thing, she was toast. So again, that's the inexperience that I had with dealing with pests. So going back to killing plants, don't feel bad. Know that it's just part of entering the plant community, and you can always, if you start with the cheaper plants, you can always go back and get another one, which is going to help you in the long run, because then you're not necessarily going to have an expensive plant that's going to perish on you that is irreplaceable. Like say you inherit a plant from your family member and it ends up dying and it's from your like great grandma or something like that. Like I would be devastated, and I know that I have some of those plants coming to me when my parents are done with them, but I definitely suggest just starting small, and even if you kill them, don't feel bad. Like I know it's posted out there a lot by a lot of different content creators on Instagram, on Facebook groups, on YouTube, about people that have been collecting plants for not a really long time and kind of bragging about, I've never killed any plants, look at all the plants I have, blah 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 blah. Well, I have some unfortunate news to tell you, that it is definitely possible and highly probable that you will kill a plant in your plant journey. It's just part of the game, and it's easier, like I said, to kill a pothos or to kill a snake plant than it is to kill one of the more expensive plants. And again, I have killed so many plants. I have learned so much from it. Like I know that I cannot take care of specific plants in my house because I just don't have the care requirements for it, or I just don't give them what they need, or I don't even know what they need, and they don't even know what they need. Like, what do they need? I don't know. Some plants I'm just completely just like, leave it on the shelf, and I walk into like plant nurseries and I see them dying in there and I'm like, it's not me. It's you. So that happens. Even like I've toured so many botanical gardens in so many different countries, and Calatheas are a big one for people, and I know that they're a struggle. I've managed to do well with quite a few, and I will probably do a Calathea care, or how I care for my Calatheas, or how I bring them back, because I've had some tragic cases as well, but generally speaking, plants can come back from the dead, the resurrection, as it can be called. So I've walked in the Kew Gardens in London, and I remember walking past a bunch of Calatheas, and they were Calathea orbifolias specifically, and I know that can be a difficult one for a lot of people, and they just look like trash. And that is like the perfect conditions for them. High humidity, they were in good light, like the light that they require, and they just brown edges, pathetic little leaves, like maybe they had bugs. I didn't touch them because you're not supposed to touch plants at botanical gardens, but either way, it made me feel better. And when I shared that to my story on Instagram a couple years ago, I know that quite a few other people felt significantly better knowing that even at the Kew Gardens, where someone is literally paid to care for these plants, this plant was hurting. So remember that you can kill plants and you don't need to feel bad about it. I've killed plants, and I'll probably make a video of the plants that, for whatever reason it is, I can't keep alive. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. I hope that you found this entertaining at least, or a little bit informative. If you have any other video suggestions, I would love to hear them in the comments, and I really appreciate all of the support that I got on my first video. So this is why I've released a second one. We'll see how this goes, like I said. Thanks so much for watching.